Hello, everybody. Welcome to another installment of PNW Affliction. This is book number 7, named Empty Armada, narrated by Chance Paladin and written by Chance Paladin and read in front of a live streaming audience. First, the legalese. All rights reserved. No portion of this book may be reproduced in any form without permission from the author, except as permitted by U.S. copyright law. This is a work of fiction. Names, characters, businesses, places, events, and incidents are either the products of the author's imagination or used in a fictitious manner. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or actual events is purely coincidental. Content advisory is as follows. I write post-apocalyptic books, therefore portions of these stories are intended for mature audiences. There's about as much romance as you would expect in a typical post-apocalyptic scenario. Explicit sexual acts when included are germane to the story and not intended to be gratuitous or fetishized. There isn't really any hard swearing worse than what you'd hear on cable. There's a moderate range of violence, as would be expected in a post-apocalypse story. However, the suffering aspects are not deliberately glamorized or embellished upon. Forward. With so many walking around on both sides, wishing a mother effer would, there were a few on both sides, wishing mother effers wouldn't. There were people acting as labels and treating each other as labels. Those exact same people forgot that sometimes those labels actually meant something and that there was no transcendence from identity. The posers, fakes, and phonies would be identified. The truth would come out. It inevitably had to, because the most important thing had long since been forgotten. All of the little lives that interjoined us looked up to us to not completely destroy everything for selfish reasons. Time passed, and at the end of it all the cognitive dissonance in the world didn't save the lives that guided the original intentions. But then again, whether you're fighting for identity or ideology, it rarely does. Chapter 1. Trying to Get Up. Home. Stronghold. 2 years and 6 months after the collapse. Spring. I'd been sleeping for a while. I didn't know how long. I dreamt a new dream. My phone had been live streaming an event, something I'd never actually do. In the process of the event, my phone was stolen and kept live streaming. I borrowed someone else's phone to use the live stream clues to find mine, and in the process I lost my hat. Eventually my phone ran out of battery, and I wasn't able to find it in time. I had no hat, no phone, and the day ended. Hatless and phoneless, I woke up. What a weird dream. I reached over and checked my phone. I was too weak to even grab it, but conscious enough to tell the difference between dreams and reality, to remember that it was there. I rolled over and went back to sleep, hoping the next time I awoke I would have the energy to crawl out of bed. After having a commonly themed dream of, if given enough chances to try something over and over again, I could eventually fix everything, I had the energy to get up. I thought for a second as I collected my bearings on reality. How many chances would I need in every universe working in parallel with an infinite amount of time to build an entire department of people doing what I do to actually fix things? I sat and dwelled on it as my stomach uncramped from the anxiety, stress, and weight I put on my shoulders. I grabbed my phone and laid flat again, trying to get my stomach to uncramp so I could get up. I tilted my head back for a second, saw the dream catcher that another person at the stronghold had made for me over 2 years ago when I'd asked for it. It had taken a while to get one from the Native American tribe we had living in our local state. The tribe was doing quite well, in fact. They'd set up a perimeter around their entire agreed-upon reservation land. It was a secure set of property and respectably sized piece of land. If you were friends with them, you were guaranteed safe passage through Puyallup to the coast. They had their own trading post there, and that's where someone picked me up a legit, authentic dream catcher. It worked pretty good most of the time when the cat wasn't trying to get at it. I put it up high, though, so she could only stare. My cat couldn't jump very high, after all. The local Native American tribe had ended up being pivotal to our transportation plan, and they had showed a lot of support in stabilizing the region. They had turned on their left-leaning politics before the collapse, realizing it was the left that was betraying and selling them out. They'd switched to independent at the last second, even though they didn't have to. It was the turning point for them taking ownership of their own destiny and the beginning of rebirth of a once powerful nation. It had been a hard road, but they owned it. Now that they were fully established, it was a huge swath of land we didn't have to worry about anymore. It was a win-win, and we shared positive relations with them whenever we could. In the beginning, we'd have to cautiously drive through the area, unsure of the security situation, but we'd pass through enough times to where they'd recognized us as not being trouble for them. Eventually, we became trusted allies and did a lot of trading and knowledge sharing. It was finally starting to feel like a semi-whole state again. Sure, the other side still owned the city-states for hundreds of miles north and south, so besides that. We left the old cities alone, though, for the large portion of the time, and they left us alone after finding out the hard way several times. We had hardened up fast, and were too far away for them to cause us ever an immediate threat. We heard rumors, though. Rumors that the other side was trying to amass enough fuel for enough vehicles to start hitting us. We got orders from upper management. It was time to develop and execute a strategic and sudden operation to maintain balance. I crawled out of my bed after my bizarre dream with my phone in tow. It was pre-dawn and time for another op. It was about 6 months since we'd got the psychological torture prison shut down. I guess that it had taken a portion of that to complete the process, but regardless, it was about 6 months or so. Spring was in full swing, and the stronghold had been busy at work getting the plants in the greenhouses ready to go in the ground. A few of us were busy doing something else, though. We've been working on a plan late into the night for the last several days on a tip. The other side was preparing a massive assault on many of our strongholds at the same time, due to a fuel source they'd somehow got. In a few days, they would have the last of their fuel and could begin to move out. I'd come up with a plan and asked for more details and got some more information and made some more of the plan, and then we were ready to go. Well, we were always ready to go, but usually the plans were more firmed up than this. This was a loose plan, but the assets were in place. I got ready to go as I always had and checked my cat's food and water and kissed her on the head, and she head-butted me in the mouth. I left my tiny home to the morning bugle call in the square. I looked around and the rest of our team was crawling out, and from a distance they looked about as exhausted as I felt. The time I'd spent lately at the church helped. The doctrine was a synthesis of everything that had worked to get us this far, some of it from the old and some of it from the new, and with some Buddhism thrown in for good measure. Introducing the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Book of Enoch and Tobias, etc. was weird to a few people, but it ended up working out when the context was included. Everyone was free to worship what they wanted, of course, but we were basically turning into spiritual warriors. It had been getting us through these tough times where it was more of an emotional and spiritual battle than a physical one. Would we crucify someone accused of witchcraft or someone with a different lifestyle than ours? Of course not. We had much bigger issues to deal with than to be attacking each other when nobody was hurting anyone else within the community and the new culture we were creating. Quite simply, about 80% of the church didn't survive the collapse. The ones that focused on physical and emotional prepping did okay, as we always knew they would, but they were the exception, not the rule. The majority of churches collapsed under their own bloated weight, unable to see their own pockets and egos. When it was time for words to transition into action, the unprepared religious leaders all sided with the new government or dissolved entirely. We still saw missionaries from time to time. We kept them at the gate in case they had viruses or were scouts. They would patiently wait while we went and got any folks that historically followed their teachings or anyone who wanted to hear their spiel. It worked out pretty good. They'd scurry along and try to make it to the next area to keep preaching whatever it was they believed in. Sometimes they would ask for donations or whatever, and we would give some of what we could to keep their little pilgrimages going. The larger ones that were left now, all operated in the big city-states, were teaching a hybrid of self-power and earth power. The guys had smuggled me out a copy of their book through one of their contacts for me to read for analysis. Some of it made sense, but it was way out of context. I heard the concepts separately before, and I understood that it would only get them so far. We'd been pushing ourselves well past our prior limits on our secure farm and had been trying to figure out if we should be running our night security leaner or try to double up instead. It was hard to decide when we needed several off our perimeter detail in the planning phase due to their prior experience. It was a tough call to make, but thankfully a few of the people in our stronghold that weren't on our team stepped up. They wanted to learn our procedures and tactics for quite a while, and they seemed legit. Only one or two of them had ever fully integrated with the team because we didn't have an intermediate vetting level. These situations tied together well, and everyone on night patrol teamed up with a local from the stronghold that we trusted, so they could build more trust. The flag raised. We saluted or held our hand to our heart and said the Pledge of Allegiance. The bugle played. We went to have breakfast and nobody talked. We were talked out and it was time for doing. I noticed people looking at us concerned. I whispered to our group, which still largely sat alone, although a few of the guys had their wives or girlfriends with them. We aren't talking. People are giving us funny looks. A few of the guys looked around and noticed, and one of the guys chirped up, "Anyone see the game last night?"